The day my father died, my brother shook hands with the estate attorney before the body was even cold. I wasn't supposed to know that, but I did, because the attorney's assistant was someone I went to high school with, and she texted me from the parking lot of the funeral home while I was still inside picking out a casket with my mother. Just so you know. He scheduled it 2 hours ago. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and went back inside and helped my mother decide between mahogany and oak. I didn't say anything. I had learned, a long time ago, that saying things too early only gave people time to build a defense. My father built that company from nothing. Literally nothing. He used to tell the story at dinner every Thanksgiving, how he started with a cargo van, a handshake deal with a small regional distributor, and $43 left in his checking account. By the time he died, Aldercroft Logistics had contracts with 3 major retailers and employed 61 people. He was proud of those 61 people. He knew most of their names. He also knew and told me directly what he wanted to happen when he was gone. I was supposed to run it, not my brother, not my mother, who had never wanted anything to do with the business and said so freely. Me. I had worked there since I was 19, starting in the warehouse, moving to operations, then to logistics coordination, then to the role my father had given me officially 3 years ago, director of operations. I knew every contract, every supplier relationship, every employee by name. I had built the systems that kept the company running on time. My brother had worked there for 11 months in 2019 before he quit to explore other opportunities, which turned out to mean day trading from his apartment for 2 years. None of that seemed to matter to anyone in the weeks after the funeral. My father had a will. Of course he did. He was meticulous about everything, including paperwork. The will had been drafted 4 years ago by an attorney in the city. A woman named, I'll call her my father's attorney, because she's relevant later. The will was clear. 51% of company shares to me, 30% to my mother, 19% to my brother. Control of operations and executive decisions to me, pending a 6-month transition period. The reading was scheduled for a Thursday morning 3 weeks after the funeral. I remember what I wore: dark green blouse, grey slacks. I had been up since 4 in the morning going over documents because I wanted to be prepared, wanted to be calm, wanted to walk in there as the version of myself my father believed in. I drove myself. My mother rode with my brother. I should have noticed that. The attorney's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. Glass conference table, city view. I sat across from my mother and my brother, with my father's attorney at the head of the table, and a second man I didn't recognize seated near the window, holding a leather portfolio. I asked who he was. My brother said he was just here to observe. The will was read, everything as I had expected. The shares, the structure, the transition plan. My father's attorney was methodical and clear. I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in 3 weeks. Then the man by the window opened his leather portfolio. He said he represented a secondary estate filing. He said that my father had signed an amended document 6 weeks before his death, and that under the terms of that amendment, operational control of Aldercroft Logistics would transfer to a 3-person management committee. My brother, a business partner of my brother's, I had never heard of, and a 3rd seat that was currently to be determined. I was listed in the amendment as a legacy stakeholder. No voting rights, no executive authority, a salary and the title of senior advisor. My father's attorney looked at the document like she had never seen it before, because she hadn't. I said that very quietly. I said, she hasn't seen that before. My brother said the amendment had been filed through a different firm. He said my father had decided to make changes privately. He said this was all legal and above board and that he hoped we could move forward as a family. My mother looked at the table. I looked at my father's attorney. She gave me the smallest, steadiest look I have ever received from another person. It meant don't say anything else right now. So I didn't. I gathered my copy of the original will. I picked up my bag. I said, very clearly, so everyone in that room could hear me, I'll be in touch. Then I walked to the elevator and I stood in it alone on the way down, and I let myself shake for exactly 14 floors. The next 72 hours were the worst kind of busy. The kind where you're running on no sleep and cold coffee, and you keep catching yourself staring at a wall, because your brain needs a second to catch up with what's happening to you. I called my father's attorney from my car in the parking garage. She told me what I already suspected. She had never been informed of any amendment, had no record of a secondary filing, and had several procedural questions about how it had been executed. She used the phrase significant irregularities and told me not to sign anything, not to step back from any of my operational responsibilities, and to let her make some calls. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen. I made a list. The list started with everything I knew about my father's state of mind in his last 6 weeks. He had been sick, a cardiac event in October, then complications, then a long, slow decline. But he had been lucid. He had called me from the hospital twice to talk about a supplier negotiation I was handling. He had emailed me 11 days before his death about a staffing issue in the Memphis depot. He had been present. He had been himself. The idea that he had quietly gone to a different attorney, signed a document that contradicted everything he had told me for 3 years, and told no one, not me, not my mother, not his own attorney of 2 decades, did not make sense. It made no sense at all. I wrote that down too. My brother called me the next morning. He used his careful voice, the one he uses when he wants something. He said he knew this was hard. He said he hoped I could see that Dad had just wanted to make sure the business had strong leadership going forward. He said he hoped I wouldn't do anything that would hurt the family. I let him finish. Then I said, "I'm going to need to see the original signed document." He paused. Then he said the firm handling the amendment would be in touch. He has not called me since. What I found over the next 2 weeks, with my father's attorney and an independent document examiner she brought in, was this. The amendment had been signed on a Tuesday. My father had been admitted to the hospital the previous Friday, with what his medical team later confirmed was a significant neurological event secondary to his cardiac condition. His cardiologist documented that during the following week, he had intermittent periods of confusion and was not consistently oriented to time and place. On that Tuesday, he would not have been capable of understanding what he was signing. There was more, the signature itself. When compared against 6 other documents my father had signed in the months before his illness, documents I had been collecting quietly from the company files showed inconsistencies. The examiner was careful with his language. He said, notable variation in pressure pattern and letter formation consistent with either significant physical impairment or potential third-party influence. He meant it might not be my father's signature at all. My father's attorney filed a formal contest. She also contacted the State Bar regarding the firm that had handled the amendment, because there were questions about whether they had conducted the capacity assessment required before witnessing the signing of a document of that significance. My brother's attorney called and said this was going to get ugly. My brother called my mother, and my mother called me and told me, crying, that she just wanted everyone to stop fighting, that Dad would have hated this, that maybe I could just let it go and trust that my brother would take care of things. I listened to her. I really did. I know she was in pain. I know she was exhausted and grieving, and genuinely believed that the best way to survive this was to smooth it over. But I also knew what my father had told me. Not once, many times. In his office, at his kitchen table, in a parking lot outside a supplier meeting where he'd grabbed my arm and said, "This is yours. I built this for you. Don't let anyone tell you different." I told my mother I loved her. I told her I was sorry she was in the middle of this. I told her I was not going to stop. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning 6 weeks later. Not a full trial, an evidentiary hearing, to determine whether the amendment was valid and whether the contest should proceed. I prepared for 4 weeks. I had the documents. I had the medical records, obtained through my mother's authorization as surviving spouse. I had the document examiner's report. I had the testimony of 2 employees who had visited my father in the hospital during that week and could speak to his condition. I had 11 emails and 3 voicemails from my father, time-stamped from the weeks before his admission, in which he discussed company matters with me in his usual precise way. And I had one more thing. My father was a man who believed in documentation. He documented everything. Contracts, conversations, decisions. When I cleaned out his home office 2 weeks after his death, I found in the back of his desk drawer a small external drive. Navy blue. The kind you can get at any office supply store. It had a piece of masking tape on it with his handwriting. For Zoe. Don't share. My name is not Zoe, but that was what he called me. Had called me since I was 4 years old. I didn't open it immediately. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe some part of me knew that whatever was on it was going to ask something of me that I needed to be strong enough to give. I opened it 10 days before the hearing. It contained one file, a video, 43 minutes long, recorded on his laptop camera, dated 11 weeks before his death, 3 weeks before his first hospitalization, back when he was still himself, still sharp, still the man who could quote you freight rates from memory and argue contract terms for 4 hours without a note in front of him. He was sitting at his desk. The same desk I had helped him pick out when they moved to the house in Crestwood. He was wearing his reading glasses. He looked directly at the camera and said, "If you're watching this, something went wrong, and I need to tell you what's right. I can't give you every word, but I can tell you what he said." He said he had learned, in the spring of that year, that my brother had approached the company's secondary financial partner about a restructuring arrangement that my brother had no authority to initiate. He said my brother had represented himself as having more control over the company's future than he did. He said he had confronted my brother about it and been told it was just exploratory conversations. He said he didn't believe that. He said he was recording this video because he had also learned through his own attorney that someone had requested copies of the company's founding documents and shareholder structure from the state corporate registry, a request that had not come from him and had not come from his attorney. He said, "I don't know what's coming, but I know what I want. I've said it in writing. I've said it to my attorney, and I'm saying it here. Zui runs this company. That is not a suggestion. That is the last thing I'm going to be unambiguous about." He talked for another 30 minutes about the company, about specific contracts, specific relationships, specific things he wanted me to know going forward. It was practical. It was methodical. It was him. At the end, he took his glasses off. He looked at the camera for a moment without saying anything. Then he said, "You were always the one. I should have said that more when I could." I watched that video 4 times before the hearing. I did not watch it a 5th time because I needed to be able to walk into that room without falling apart. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a long table with the judge at one end and both legal teams on either side. My brother sat across from me with his attorney and the man from the leather portfolio. He didn't look at me when I came in. He had a new suit. I noticed that because my father had bought him his last suit for a cousin's wedding 2 years ago, and I remember my father joking that it was the most expensive thing he'd ever bought, that he hoped his son would actually wear. My father's attorney presented the medical records. She presented the document examiner's report. She presented the testimony of the 2 employees. Then she presented the video. The room changed when it started, not dramatically, but I felt it. The way a room gets quiet in a different way when something real enters it. My father's voice came out of the speakers. I watched the judge. I watched the opposing attorney. I watched the man from the leather portfolio, who had been leaning back in his chair the whole morning, with the particular ease of someone who expected to win. He stopped leaning back about 4 minutes in. My brother stared at the table. My father spoke for 43 minutes. When the video ended, the judge asked if the opposing counsel needed a recess. The opposing attorney said yes. The recess lasted 22 minutes. When they came back, they requested a continuance to review the new evidence. The judge denied it. By the end of that afternoon, the amendment had been suspended pending full review, and the opposing firm's conduct had been referred for a separate inquiry. My father's original will was reinstated as the operative document. I did not celebrate. I didn't have it in me. I just sat in the hallway on a wooden bench and called my father's attorney and said thank you. And she said, "You did the work." And I said I know, and we sat on the phone together for a few seconds without speaking, which felt like the right way to end that particular day. My brother has not called me. My mother called 3 days later. She asked how I was. I told her I was tired but okay. She asked if I was going to keep running the company. I said yes. She was quiet for a moment and then she said she was glad my father had left it to me and that she was sorry it had happened the way it did. I said I was sorry too. She asked if I was going to be at Christmas. I said I'd let her know. The first morning I walked into Aldercroft as the person my father had always intended me to be. I got there early, before anyone else. I unlocked the front door with the key I had carried for 11 years and I stood in the lobby for a minute in the dark before I turned the lights on. My father used to do that. Come in early and stand in the quiet before the day started. He said it helped him remember why he built it. He said a building feels different when it's empty, more like what it actually is, which is just space that people fill with purpose. I don't know how long I stood there. Not long. The cleaning crew was already done, and the coffee machine in the break room was on a timer, and I could smell it starting from down the hall. I turned the lights on. I sat down at my desk, his desk, the one I had inherited along with everything else, and I opened my laptop and I started to work. The navy blue drive was in my top drawer. I kept it there, not as a reminder of the fight or the hearing or any of it, as a reminder of him, sitting at his desk in his reading glasses, looking at the camera, telling me what I already knew. I put my hand on the drawer once, just briefly, before the first phone call of the day came in. Then I picked up the phone and I answered it, and I got to work.